Alright fellas, are you an aspiring animator? You want to make cartoons, but you're worried about how long it takes to make cartoons? Okay? Look at look at this right here. Okay? That took this lasts like less than a second. Maybe just a little over a second. It took like 2 days to do. And then we come over to this right here. That walk cycle also took like 2 days to do because I did it all at once. Well, I have the solution to your problems, okay? We're going to come back over to these frames right here. Okay? What I want to do is I want to clean up this keyframe and this keyframe and everything in between. And I want to do it quickly. Now, normally, it would take a long time because that's probably going to be like 6 frames or something in between. And if you don't want it to look like a mess, you gotta take the time to make sure all your lines are clean. So my solution is this animation program right here. It's called Kakani. It's I've been using it for a few years, on and off. The problem with it is that you kind of have to like plan to use it because of the way it works. So I thought I'd do a little tutorial on how to use it. Basically what it does is it generates in-between frames for you. It's not like an AI. It's not like those horrible AI programs that are like make Goku fights like 60 frames a second and it looks terrible because it doesn't take any of the timing into account. But it does help a lot. The way it works, and I'll show you in a second, is that every single line you draw gets turned into like basically a shape tween. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, you'll know what it means in a second. So, first things first, we need to have our 2 keyframes in PNG format. So I've already done that over here in this other file. The 2 frames are on a separate file so I can just export it. Now, we're actually going to make these black. Now, when you're working in Kakani, you're working in like PNG formats and such. Which means everything like not on your workspace is going to get cut off, but we want that stuff to make it easier to color later. So you're going to want what's called overscan, which is basically where you take the frames and you make it smaller on the stage so that you can see everything, even the parts that you're not supposed to see. So like the ugly bits down here, or that are going to be down here, we'll be able to see that. And we want to be able to see that because we're going to size it up when we're going to zoom it in rather when we bring it back into Flash later. So first we're going to export this as an image sequence. We want it to be a PNG sequence, otherwise it's not going to, it's not going to work so well. And we want that, this is probably fine. We want it in 24-bit. So that it doesn't become transparent, because transparency kind of like makes things a little weird when doing things in Kakani. So we're going to hit export. We're going to move over to Kakani, and down here on the timeline, first let me show you all the bits and pieces of Kakani. So this is what the default layout looks like. I believe this is the most recent version, Kakani 2.1. Timeline is down here. Tools are right here. It's laid out like pretty much inversely to Flash or Animate. Timeline's down here instead of up here. Well, actually, in the newer versions of Flash, the timeline's down here, but you get the point. Timeline is down here. Tools are right here. Everything else I'll show you as we get to it. So, first things first, we want to right-click on this little bottom layer that gets generated, and we're going to do Load Image Sequence. So we're going to navigate to the folder that has the image sequence. We're going to select the first image in the sequence. You can see it's called Kakani Tutorial 0001. Going to hit open. Going to hit OK. And now we have the 2 frames in the sequence. All right, so now we have it here, and it's of the proper size. So everything is going to be appearing like even so the little part at the bottom where you fill it in so that you can color later, that's going to be appearing on the screen as well. And the reason for that is so that when we export it as a PNG, that bit actually appears on the like in the full image, so that we can color it easier when we bring it into back into Flash. And you can right click here, and you are going to go to new cell. Then in this new cell, you're going to start cleaning up your frame. So instead of the brush tool in Kakani, we use the pen tool. Make it sure that it says normal stroke type on the top over here. And then we're going to start cleaning the frame up, and we can change. This is like our little property bar, so we can change the size of the stroke. So typically at 1080p, I want it to be like 10 pixels to like 5 pixels usually. So you got like a nice thick but not too thick black line. So we're going to start cleaning this up, and when you do that, it's going to be tempting to try and do all of this in like one stroke, but you don't want to do that because that messes up the way that Kakani like thinks about these lines. So we're going to clean him up by making each line like separate. And of course you can zoom in when you need to. Kakani has this neat little feature where it'll automatically close your lines for you. But it means that if you're like too close to the end, it'll try and close it for you, so you want to be careful about that. So Kakani has this neat feature called the stroke editor. And what you can do with it is you can actually like move your stroke around as you need to. I think it's really useful. It's this one right here, this second one on the toolbar right here. You'll notice that I left a little messy bit right here. That's intentional because it helps. We can always clean that up later, and leaving lines like that intact helps Kakani think about the frames as it's, you know, in betweening them. Kakani is really good for some of these more like simple shots where there's not like if a character is moving like kind of slowly, or you know, there's not a whole lot of action happening on screen, but you still want the character to be moving slightly. Kakani's really good for that because I think the slow movements are the hardest ones to animate personally. They take the longest at least. Okay, so we are going to go and create a new layer, a new drawing layer. And we are going to shade it as well. Or we're going to create the shading lines, that is. Okay, so now we're going to make the cell with the rough drawing invisible. That's this little like eyeball symbol right here. You just tap that, it makes that invisible. So now we are going to create a new frame. And you can see Kakani actually, actually we're going to make the rough drawing frame visible again. I apologize. So you can see we have an onion skin there. We kind of don't want that. So first of all, we're going to lock this and disable the onion skin on that. The onion skin is this little light bulb symbol. On cell 1, which is where the rough drawing is, we're going to disable it so that we can't see that. And then we're actually going to disable it for all of these as well. The reason being, I already have the rough drawing. I don't really need the onion skin. Now, we have to keep in mind, because Kakani tweens things line by line, that we have to draw each of those lines in the same order that we did previously. So on this drawing, every line, we have to draw it in the exact same order. So I have to draw this first and whatever. They're actually numbered when you cursor over them and such. So that's number 6, whatever. But to make it even easier, we have the navigator, which I've got on a second monitor. We've got the navigator right here. And the navigator tells you which line you should be working on. So I'm going to put that on my second monitor, and we're going to draw the second frame using the navigator as a guide. You want to draw the frames, or the lines rather, in the same order and in the same direction as you did originally. So instead of doing it like this, I have to do it like this. Obviously, this goes without saying, but you want to make sure you're doing it on the right layer as well, because if you do it on the wrong layer, you're going to mess things up a bunch. So my line art goes on layer 1 down here. My shading goes on layer, or my shading outlines go on layer 2. So you can see I kind of messed up here. So his eye is like 2 lines now, or the bottom part is. But on my navigator, it's only 1 line, because that's how it was in the first frame. So I have to be careful to like not mess things up. I have to essentially draw this as 1 line. That should be fine. Alright, so now we do the shading. Alright, so now we have the line art and the shading done. We've done it in the correct order, so that on both this frame and this frame, I've done every single line in the exact same order and direction as I did on the previous frame. So now, this is where the magic happens. So now, we can basically just drag this out. We'll make this, yeah, we'll make it 7 frames. It's 24 frames a second, that should be fine. So now, and if you want, you can add like additional frames in between, but what I'm going to do now, just because this is a demonstration, is I am going to right-click here. I'm going to right-click here. I'm going to hit Generate In Between. And why is it not working? Okay, so the problem was that this frame was not a keyframe. So if that ever happens, you right-click on this, and you hit Convert to Keyframes. All right, so now that they're both keyframes, you have to have 2 keyframes for this to work. You're going to right-click on the first frame, you can hit Generate In Between. And now, you can see, it has generated all these in-between frames. But, it's kind of robotic and shitty, isn't it? So, we come over here to this window right here, so by default you can't see it. All you gotta do is scroll down on this toolbar. There should be a little window called Timing. And we are going to basically add a simple ease in, ease out, just for just for you know, demonstration. So now we're going to hit generate in between frames again. And now it's a lot less robotic. We can zoom out. We're going to make that actually like 12 frames a second. And doesn't that look fantastic? And all we had to do was draw 2 frames. Now you can do more complicated stuff with it, but in my opinion, Kakani is more useful for these more simple shots like this. Like, this probably would have taken me like 8 hours to do if I had done it frame by frame. Instead, it took me like 30 minutes, basically. And it looks, I mean, it looks pretty good. So now, what we're going to do with this, we're going to save it, obviously. And then we're gonna basically export 2 sets of PNGs. Now the first one, we're gonna make this, and we're gonna make the shading layer invisible so that we just have the line art. We're gonna do export video. I'm kidding, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do export image, and then we are going to, on this window, PNG. I'm going to do all frames right here. And this is all good. Yeah, this is all fine. So then, yeah, we're just going to hit OK. I'm just going to export it. And then we're going to make the shading layer visible. We're going to do the exact same thing. Export image, except we're going to call this one Kakani tutorial shade. Going to do all frames, okay. Now we can go into Adobe Animate. We can delete these frames. We can go to File, Import to Stage. We're going to import the frames we just completed. So Kakani clean 1 through 7. We only have to click on the first one, and it's going to say this file appears to be part of a sequence of images. Do you want to import all the images in the sequence? We're going to hit yes. And we're going to make our stage size 1920 by 1080 real quick. Show frame. All right. So there's our beautiful clean frames. And then we are going to create a new layer. Do the same thing. File, import to stage. And then we're going to import the shading layer. So now we should have 2 layers, one of the line art and one with the shading. So now we are going to use a feature. I'm going to go to Modify, Bitmap, and we have to do that one at a time. I used to have a custom program that would do this one by one. In Toon Boom, you can actually turn these into vectors like in a sequence. Here you got to do it one by one. So for all of these 7 frames, so 14 frames, one for shading, one for the other. We're going to go to Modify. And let's turn this invisible just to make it simple. Modify, Bitmap, Trace Bitmap. These settings should be good. You kind of got to play with it a bit. This is why, so I personally like a little bit of boil when my characters are moving. It makes it seem less robotic. So, okay, so you can play with this a bit, but in my opinion, the best settings is like color threshold like 75, minimum area 1, corners threshold, few corners, curve fit smooth, and it kind of boils things a bit. You can actually bring that down to like 50. And then you're going to do that with every single one of these. So you'll hit the trace button, do that, trace, do that, trace, do that. And then you're going to do the same thing on the shading layer. You got to make sure you clicked into the object, otherwise it won't work. So basically when you move to a new frame, click on the object, hit trace, hit OK. This does get a little bit tedious. So what I recommend doing, is using a program that does this for you, or using it, not a program, but like an extension or a command for Animate. There are a lot of tutorials on how to make one if you can't find one, but you should be able to find one just like by Googling like batch trace in Adobe Animate or something like that. So now what we got to do is we need to hit edit multiple frames so that everything is selected. I'm going to select all, so Control A. It's going to take a second because what it basically did was trace every pixel, including the transparent ones. We're going to go over here. And we're going to set the fill color to black. And now you can see it's like, if you zoom in, there's like jagged edges everywhere. What you can do to help fix this is, again, select all frames, and you're going to come over here and hit the smoothen button. Hit that maybe like twice. And now, not only does it get rid of the jagged edges somewhat, but it also creates like a boil so that it looks a little bit more like it was done by hand. If you don't want it to look like it was done by hand, that's fine by me, but I don't know why you would want that. So now we're going to start coloring this. The first thing that I'm going to do, because I personally didn't want Kakani to do the color separations here, is I'm going to just really quickly add those in. Alright, so now I've got the color separation done, so now I am going to really quickly go ahead and color everything I just did. Starting with the shading. Alright, so now I've colored it and I went ahead and messed with the timing a bit. I'm probably going to mess with it some more, but take a look at this. It looks like it's a small movement, and I could have tweened it, but it looks like I did it frame by frame, which in my opinion looks better because it looks more hand-drawn. And I very clearly did not. I mean, you saw me do it, not frame by frame. I mean, you know, it's not perfect, this process. It's something that I'm gonna have to keep working on. Like, you'll notice that the shading outlines don't quite exactly match the line art, and there's a lot of like jagged edges everywhere. And you can do things to mess with this, like you can smooth it a couple more times. You know, it makes it boil a little bit more, but it also, and then you got like problems right there. So this process is by no means perfect, but if you experiment with it a bit, as I have over the years, you know, you can get some pretty good looking stuff out of it, and I think it'll help you. It'll make making this stuff a lot faster. At least these tiny little shots that nobody cares about. You can still make it look frame by frame without actually having to do it frame by frame, and it makes it a lot faster. It's a lot easier. You know, something like this would have taken me, like, as small as it seems, it would have taken me like a few hours to do, and this only took me like maybe 30 minutes when you don't factor in the time I was ordering food. Kakani is something worth investing in, and I hope that eventually they integrate it into Flash, or like at least allow you to export SWFs or vectors or something. There is an export to After Effects button. I might check that out, but you know, that was a quick little tutorial on how to use Kakani. If you want to purchase Kakani or get a free trial, you can go to kakani.sg. I'm going to type it right here. This is not a paid promotion. They did not pay me to make this. I just think it's a very useful program, and I think more people should use it. And maybe we'll get more steady updates if more people use it. So yeah, you use Kakani. It's a big help. Helps a lot. Again, this would have taken, as small as this shot is, would have taken hours. It only took like half an hour. And I've used it in the Twin Souls before. Like, there are a couple of shots, especially in episode 4. I think there's one in episode 3 as well, where I used Kakani. And it worked very well. It was very, I essentially drew like the keyframes and nothing else for those shots. Sometimes I drew like one frame in the middle, but for the most part, I only drew like 2 to 3 frames for each of those shots. So kakani.sg, again, it's right there, and there will be a link in the description below. Go check this program out. Seriously. If you want to make cartoons but you don't know how, I think this is a great program to get started. Go check it out. Seriously.